If you are in the market for a turbo-petrol compact SUV, you are spoiled for choices. But today we've narrowed down your options. So number one, we have the Kia Sonet. Now this car has set the tone for its refinement, performance and even tech. Then comes the Tata Nexon, which in its latest avatar has been significantly updated, and as of today, it's the best-selling compact SUV in the country.
But then you also have the latest entrant in the segment in the form of the Mahindra XUV 3XO. And if you think it's just a minor facelift with the XUV 300 crossed out and 3XO written, you will be very wrong, because as you can see, it's a significant update on the design of the exterior and on the interior as well. So there is a lot to talk about.
और अगर आप ये वीडियो हिंदी में देखना पसंद करेंगे तो हमारे वॉटकार इंडिया यूट्यूब चैनल पे जरूर जाके देखें, उसका लिंक आपको नीचे मिल जाएगा।
For this comparison, we've got their top variants lined up. In terms of pricing, it is the Kia Sonet X-Line which is the most affordable at 14.75 lakh rupees. The Nexon Fearless Plus S DCT is dearer by 5,000 rupees. However, like the Mahindra XUV 300, the Mahindra XUV 3XO in its AX7L automatic guise remains the most expensive car in its class, and this time the premium it commands over its rivals is substantial. So does Mahindra justify its premium? Let's find out. Being compact SUVs, these have been designed to measure less than 4 meters in length. However, the Mahindra 3XO is the widest and tallest in this trio, and it also has the longest wheelbase as well. It has undergone a comprehensive makeover, and now it gets a very EV-like closed-off grille, finished in piano black and distinctive headlamps. Stylish alloys and a neat set of LED tail lamps further add a freshness to its design. However, its silhouette remains largely unchanged. The recently updated Kia Sonet looks like a barely shrunken Seltos, which is no bad thing. Like before, it features an array of cuts, creases and muscular lines, all of which have come together very nicely to give it a posh look. And in this shade of matte grey with blacked out bits, the Sonet is bound to turn heads. Speaking of turning heads, the Tata Nexon is certainly a looker, and even though the pre-facelift version's concept car-like styling divided opinions, this one looks mature and is likely to have universal appeal. Of course, design is a subjective topic, so do let us know in the comments which one of these suits your taste the best. Moving on to the inside, let's see what the Mahindra XUV 3XO is like.
Once you step inside the car, there's a lot to like, especially the color scheme and the bright and airiness of this cabin.
And what I like is the center console. You have your physical controls, very clear and distinct. So not really confusing, and the new screen is very nice as well.
Absolutely, and I think the usability and everything is just very simple, very easy to use with proper physical buttons for the shortcut menus. So it's very well thought of. And speaking of which, again, it gets the new digital instrument cluster, and it has customizable views. But what I really like is that, again, when you give an indicator, you can see the display right in your field of vision.
That said, there's a noticeable delay between the lane watch camera feed and is nowhere as slick as the Sonets. And a lot of functions, for example the ADAS settings, are buried deep inside the IP menu, so it isn't the most intuitive either.
And speaking on the comfort, I mean, the seats are nice and soft, upholstery is really nice, the bright really helps. But in terms of support, it's not the comfiest.
Yeah, the bolstering, I think it is, it's in that cup-like manner, so it's sort of holding me in place, but I can imagine probably for you it would have been a little too snug. But speaking of which, I think quality on the inside has really taken a step up, not just in terms of the perceived quality with the white interior, which is automatically giving it a more premium feel, but even the soft touch materials with the contrasting stitching. Having said that, one quality issue is this Harman Kardon stickering. I mean, what was Mahindra thinking? I think probably this is a pre-production vehicle, so we can let this pass, but I hope this doesn't make it a production. It just not fit in an otherwise well-finished interior.
While on that topic, I must add the Harman Kardon branded sound system certainly lifts expectations. However, in reality, sound quality is strictly average by segment standards. Nowhere near as nice as Tata's JBL or Kia's Bose systems.
One other miss is ventilated seats. I mean, they've updated the car, the competition has it, they should have had it as well.
So the cabin of the 3XO is certainly a nice place to be, but what about the backseat?
So as soon as we step into the backseat, I think this really gives you a sense of luxury and a sense of comfort on the inside thanks to the seat.
It's nice and soft for sure, and it's nice and wide as well, and of course because you have even more bright upholstery here, nice and airy.
And don't forget the panoramic sunroof. Segment first, it's huge and it is just making such a big difference, uplifting the premium quotient of this cabin.
Exactly. And for the middle passenger as well, I think this is a nice place because you have a nice flat seat. You also get individual head restraints, and you have 3-point seat belts as well. So 3 abreast in the 3XO would be quite nice.
One thing that I didn't like in this car is that you're seated in a knees up position. You're seated quite low to the ground, and I think it's not as comfortable in terms of thigh support as the other two cars.
Amenities wise, you get AC vents, 1 Type-C port. That's a bit of a miss. Maybe 2 would have made a big difference. And you also get a 12-volt charging socket with a bit of space to keep your phone as well.
Yeah, now let's see what the Nexon is like.
Alright, so into the Tata Nexon, and well, they've clearly made a big jump compared to the previous version. A lot has been modernized, up to date now, and they've really crammed it with features. Wireless charging, you get a sunroof, 10.25-inch screen, digital instrument cluster. So yeah, they've done their bit for sure.
100%. It looks a lot more modern, a lot more cleaner in terms of the approach. But of course, some things I think could have been better executed. Like this panel out here as an example. It's a touch operable panel, but I think you were mentioning it earlier that there are a lot of reflections. It's not very convenient to use. It leaves a lot of scratches, smudge marks. But what's good is that, you know, the fan speed and climate control, the temperature control is physical toggle.
Speaking of reflections, you also get this panel on the steering wheel. Not sure what the purpose is, but again, it just catches fingerprints so easily, and it's always in your face. So that is a bit of an issue.
One more thing that I'd like to touch upon is the instrument cluster. I mean, of course, it's digital. You have your, you know, different view settings as well. But I think the fonts are a bit too small, and there's a lot crammed in to that very tiny real estate. So again, you know, just in terms of execution, it's not probably as pleasing as the XUV or even the Sonet for that matter.
And then you have the seats. Now compared to the XUV and even the Sonet, these are not as accommodating. I feel slightly more snug.
Yeah, they are more snug, and I think what's good about them is that they get ventilation. That's a big plus.
Alright, well, that's the front seat. Let's quickly hop in the back and see what that's like.
What you immediately realize is that because of the two-tone interior in the 3XO, that sense of space was much better. But I think even this is a pretty squarish, a pretty spacious cabin.
Yeah, I mean, definitely airy. And yes, the all-black interior does rob away that little bit of extra space that you would have felt. But in terms of just outright space, it's not too bad. Headroom, not an issue for me. Knee room is quite decent as well. There's a good amount of room under the front seats for your feet. And what I specifically like is the under thigh support. I think the seats are really nice and well cushioned, so good amount of support.
I think it's the seat construction of the squab, you know, that's the contouring. I think that is what's adding to the thigh support. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and amenities wise, again, you get rear AC vents, you get 1 Type-C port and a USB-A. There's a bit of a hump as well in the center, so middle passengers won't be as comfortable, and you don't get adjustable headrest as well. However, you do get a 3-point seat belt for the middle passenger, but I think 3 abreast would be snug in this.
Next, we get to the Kia Sonet.
Stepping into the Kia Sonet, I think this really has a very nice and a very inviting interior. What do you have to say?
I agree. I mean, it certainly looks nice and premium. Build overall is also very good. All the buttons and switches have a nice reassuring click.
The Kia Sonet really had set the benchmark in terms of interior quality, in terms of equipment. But I think the competition now has really caught up, and they are pretty competent in this regard. What I like is that, you know, the red stitching, it really sort of gives a really sporty vibe.
There are lots of these brushed aluminum, silver, for metal materials.
Yeah.
Screens, very, very good. Instrument cluster, crisp, really nice to look at. And of course, then you have the touchscreen, slick, and all the features you need.
And you know, the execution is really nice. So, you know, when you give the right indicator, you have the screen on your right side and left on the left side. Whereas in the Nexon, it is all on the central screen. So it's not that intuitive.
Alright, speaking a bit on comfort, the seats really nice and comfy. I like the perforation on the seats as well, and I think the driver's seat is powered.
And don't forget ventilation.
Of
So
course.
it's really a good, comfortable seat to be in. Now let's check out the back seat. So it's evident the Kia is, I think, the least spacious out of the three cars. And but speaking of which, this seat is set to my driving position, and I'm pretty comfortable seated behind me. Decent knee room. I have good amount of foot room, and I can see even you're quite comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, obviously compared to the others, it's not as great, but the scooped out seats do help with the knee room, and yeah, there is space under the seats for your feet as well. I don't think three abreast would be comfortable because it's not that spacious. Even the center part, you don't get a lot of space in there, so it is going to be a struggle for three, but two passengers can be comfortable. Like the venue, it does not get a recline for the backrest, but I think the angle is pretty comfortable.
That aside, I think in terms of amenities, there's quite a bit for the rear passengers. You have your air purifier, your vents, your two charging ports, and even sun blinds, which the other two cars don't get.
Yeah, so it is a pretty packed cabin. No center headrest for the middle passenger, but it does get a 3-point seat belt. Obviously not the best position here anyway in terms of space.
So I think to summarize, we can say that, as a 4-seater, this car works very decently, but probably a 5-seater, the other two could be a little better.
Yep.
Coming to the topic of boot space, the XUV 3XO's luggage capacity is the least on paper. However, a completely redesigned tailgate and new bumpers have allowed it for a deeper boot that is slightly better than the pre-facelift version. What's nice is that all three are similarly shaped and very similar in terms of how much luggage they can accommodate. The XUV's loading lip, however, is much higher than the others, and it doesn't come with a parcel shelf either. Among other things the Mahindra gets is a panoramic sunroof, electronic parking brake and dual zone climate control, which the others don't. However, it misses on ventilated seats, powered driver's seat, and like we mentioned earlier, its Harman Kardon sound system isn't nearly as good as the other two. The Nexon doesn't get ADAS and misses out on rear disc brakes available on the other two cars. As a result, it is the most affordable Kia Sonet that gives you the maximum bang for your buck. However, if it's space that you want, the XUV 3XO takes a clear win. With that out of the way, time for drive evaluation. Into the XUV 3XO first.
Alright, so into the Mahindra XUV 3XO, it gets the TGDI engine, 130 horsepower. On the side of refinement, quite a refined engine.
Quite a refined
nice
engine.
and quiet.
Absolutely, for a 3-cylinder. I mean,
Yeah.
it is quite nice. I think among the nicest, if not the nicest in this company right now. And yeah, it's a strong engine in terms of its build of speed. Not a very high revving engine, maxes out its revs a little over 5,000 RPM. But honestly, as a cruiser, it's a really good unit. And speaking of this engine, there's a peculiar character with the throttle response. So at low speeds, when you suddenly press the accelerator, it sort of leaps forward. It's a little too sudden, and I mean that just catches you by surprise. You sort of back off because you are not ready for those overwhelming sort of responses. But that being said, the engine definitely does have lag. So at highway speeds, when you break momentum and come down to below, let's say 2000 RPM, that's where it takes a while to regain momentum, and that's where you will notice the turbo lag.
But it has a new gearbox now.
Absolutely, the 6-speed torque converter. First impressions, a really smooth unit. That delay between shifts or that pause between shifts, that's not there like in some of the AMTs.
So definitely a big step up from the AMT.
Absolutely.
How does it feel in the manual mode?
So it doesn't support aggressive downshifts. So many times when you want to go from 4th to 2nd, it'll probably only let you go till the 3rd. Right. So it's not a gearbox that appreciates aggressive downshifts, but I mean the responses are pretty quick.
Paddle shifters on this are certainly missed.
Because this action is a little clunky. It doesn't have that satisfying feel, like you get in the Sonet, as an example.
Alright, so now on the topic of ride quality, the XUV 300 was always quite nice, and this continues that forward. Nice and comfortable ride. And what about handling? How was the steering?
So the one thing that I really love about the XUV is its steering wheel's lightness, especially at low speeds, at crawling speeds, when you want to park. It is absolutely effort-free. And even when you build speed or when you change the drive modes, the steering does weigh up. But there is one complaint, is that there's no feel of feedback as such. It's just weight and quite artificial at it. So if you are looking for, that sort of enthusiastic feel from the steering, well, this is not the one. Jay, so after the XUV 3XO, jumping into the Nexon, 120 horsepower, 1.2 liter turbo petrol engine, 3-cylinder. Does it feel similar in terms of its character?
Performance-wise, well, I mean, it's one of the more relaxed transmissions and powertrain options right now because yes, it has 120 horsepower and yes, it is a 7-speed DCA, which means dual clutch. But this one is programmed more for smoother shifts and not performance. Paddle shifters are available, but again, it's not the best in terms of response. They do a very good job of not harming the gearbox, so they don't really allow for aggressive downshifts. And well, to be honest, if you want a nice enthusiastic drive, control over the gearbox is what you want, and that this doesn't really give you.
And since you're talking about smoothness, I think this dual clutch transmission really irons out this engine's inconsistencies and its uneven power delivery. I think it's a lot smoother now, at least while seated out here. What do you have to say?
Yeah, I mean, totally. Power delivery now is, I mean, it's linear. There are no sudden spikes as such. You have a nice gradual surge. But earlier, where it used to be jerky and inconsistent, now that's definitely gone.
One thing that I'd like to touch upon is that when you are idling, it's at that time you can feel some vibrations in this one. I think that is not something that you feel in the XUV or in the Sonet. So I think it does rob away some points for the Nexon in terms of refinement.
Apart from a slight thrum at idle, once you get going and once you're around 60 to 70 kph, there's nothing but a slight murmur, which is totally fine.
At least as a passenger, I think the ride quality is a bit on the stiffer side, but again, there are no unnecessary movements and it's quite flat in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, you will feel a bit of firmness on undulations, but as soon as the road goes bad, the suspension really comes through. Nexon always had this very good performance on bad roads, and I think that they've carried forward with this one.
Yeah, it certainly feels like it is tough in the way it's built. And what about the steering feel? Is it as light as the XUV?
The steering, well, to be honest, it sits between the XUV and the Sonet yet again because it is sharp for sure, and it also is nice and light, but it is not as light as the XUV.
And finally, it was time to get behind the wheel of the Kia Sonet.
To the Kia Sonet finally, 120 horsepower engine, and earlier, like you said, it was the benchmark for performance, especially mated to this DC gearbox. What do you feel from behind the wheel?
So after experiencing the XUV, I think the XUV is definitely a little more powerful, a little more forceful in terms of its power delivery. But then the Sonet is not too far behind. I mean, for a car of this size, 120 horsepower, it's quite a bit. And it does have a decent amount of torque for the highways, for the city, of course. So I think it is a pretty adequate engine in this car.
And what about the 7-speed DCT?
So compared to the torque converter, the first thing that I really loved about having a 7-speed DCT is the fact that this car comes with paddle shifters. The second thing is that these paddle shifters make the drive experience so much more engaging because just at a small click, it is responding, it is downshifting when you want it to be, and it occasionally also supports aggressive downshifts. So, I mean, there's that much fun you can extract out of this engine. Also nice, I think, the smoothness of this 7-speed DCT.
Yeah.
It might not be lightning quick like, the Volkswagen units, but I mean, it's smooth, and I think that's what users will appreciate.
But I think out of the three, if you are really a keen driver, out of the three, I think this is the best combination because of the DCT and just how good it is with the engine.
Yeah, I have to agree there. And I think, even the drive experience, it's very refined. Not just in terms of the sound or the quietness, but I think even in terms of, the smoothness, the finesse with which these engine and gearbox operate. I think Kia does have that edge over the Mahindra. And the
Yeah,
Tata.
definitely. I mean, NVH levels are very, very good. The other thing, ride quality. So obviously, it is in a very tough competition. Nexon, XUV, both have been really, really good in terms of ride. Kia always had a step back. It was just a bit firm, and I think with this, that just continues.
Yeah, it is. It is a little firm, and you can feel it occasionally in the city. But there's one character that I didn't like about the Kia, and that is that you can feel a lot of vertical movement, especially at speeds. And for passengers who are, uh, prone to motion sickness, they probably will not be happy in the backseat of the Kia as much as they would in an XUV or the Nexon. One thing that I liked about the Sonet is that the steering is quite fluid. Of course, it's not bristling with feedback like some enthusiast cars, and it's not as sharp as in the Tata Nexon either. But I think it's quite fluid, it's quite smooth, and most people will not have a reason to complain. Of course, the XUV 3XO does have an edge when it comes to absolute lightness or effortlessness at parking speeds. But on the whole, there's nothing to complain about in the Sonet. And Jay, one question that I had, and I think a lot of users will have, is, but what about safety?
I think all three cars here get the basic safety kit, 6 airbags as standard, of course ABS with EBD. But I think nowadays what's really more important is the crash test rating. And in that aspect, the Mahindra is scored very well. So has the Nexon, obviously.
Wait, I'll have to stop you there. It's Mahindra definitely scored well, but in its pre-facelift, guys, now with the updates,
Correct.
that score doesn't hold true. And one thing that I'd like to point out is that, yes, having a car which is safe for crash tests and has scored 5 stars, absolutely, it is reassuring. But what is also nice is the fact that the XUV and the Sonet come with ADAS. Now, ADAS prevents an accident from happening in the first place. So, of course, the choice is yours.
Basically, the ball is in the court of the consumer, what they want. Before giving out the verdict, here's a look at the safety equipment. As mentioned, only the Kia and Mahindra get ADAS and rear disc brakes, while the Tata continues to boast of its fantastic 5-star crash test safety rating. The Mahindra hasn't been retested, but if the previous rating is anything to go by, you can expect the XUV 3XO to impress yet again with a similar score whenever that happens. Now, let's move to the verdict. As mentioned earlier, the Tata Nexon is the best-selling SUV in the country, and it isn't hard to see why. It is well equipped, its cabin is spacious, it feels tough, and to top it all, its drive experience is smooth. In fact, it is much smoother than its earlier iterations, and that's what makes the Turbo DCT a compelling buy. The Kia Sonet is the least spacious and it doesn't feel as confident as the other two at high speeds. However, besides being the most affordable car in this comparison, it also does everything expected of it with great finesse and simply comes across as a polished, well-rounded car. But Mahindra has really upped the game with the XUV 3XO. Its interiors feel plush and luxurious, the segment-first panoramic sunroof is a huge draw, 6-speed automatic works well with the turbo-petrol engine, and finally it is the best when it comes to space and refinement. It does command a significant premium over the others, but it also feels like a car from a segment above, and hence it is the winner of this comparison.